Is PlayStation in the midst of collaborating with Netflix? If a recent report published just after last week's episode is any indication, the answer is maybe. Here's the rub. Website Video Game Chronicle relayed word that data miner Steve Moser scraped some interesting stuff off of Netflix recently, all pointing towards gaming features. We know that Netflix is getting into gaming, and in fact, they're openly talking about these prospects, having testing the waters over the last couple of years with interactive games like Bandersnatch. Among the images scraped from Netflix, however, are two important ones. One shows Jin Sakai from Sucker Punch's Ghost of Tsushima, a PlayStation exclusive, and the other shows an image of a couple of DualSense controllers, the PS5's controller. That's all we know right now, but there's no denying that these images came from Netflix's own servers and are definitive in their content, Jin and PS5 controllers. What's it all mean, if anything, remains to be seen, but this news came on the back of a report from economic website CNBC that Netflix will indeed be getting into games, beginning with smaller mobile-style titles and working their way up from there. So whether they're being coy or not remains to be seen, but it doesn't necessarily sound like these images indicate the PlayStation partnership some would hope for. And such a partnership would be a major boon for Sony, as Netflix's user base is currently sitting at 209 million subscribers, and they are the holders of some of the most sophisticated streaming technologies in the world, which would certainly be manipulated and leveraged into core gaming. So James wrote into us on Patreon about this. He says, "What's up, best LSM trio? I wanted to ask you guys thoughts on the rumors and data miners information surrounding Netflix and PlayStation. After Netflix announced their new gaming push, data mined images show Sony first-party assets like Ghost of Tsushima and Netflix-themed images of the DualSense. Could this be Sony's primary answer to Game Pass? Sony and Netflix have already made deals for movie exclusivity, so the companies have already been working together. Netflix would gain the use of the arguably best next-gen controller without having to design their own and strong their own gaming IP, most likely the same game Sony intends for PC ports. Alternatively, Sony can maybe roll out a Netflix subscription into PS Plus and finally have an answer to Game Pass by teaming up streaming for games and all the rest." All right, so thank you, James, for writing in. I am more convinced by this than a lot of people are, Dustin. I'm curious what you make of this. Jaffe, when I was on his show, and I'll bring it up in a minute, had an interesting counter argument, but I actually think there might be something to this. I'm curious if you agree.
Well, the evidence is a bit puzzling to me in the fact that PlayStation does have their own streaming service with PlayStation Now, so that's something to consider. And that the other thing is that Ghost of Tsushima was selected as one of the images, which to me, in a hypothetical situation where let's say it's a partnership with Netflix, so maybe you have a Netflix subscription and you have access to streaming certain PlayStation games or something, Ghost of Tsushima, right now, wouldn't they want to be pointing people to playing that on PlayStation hardware with the director's cut? You wouldn't want to mix up the messaging too much on that, but that is what we're presented with in front of us. So as far as it being an answer to Game Pass, I don't know. This is, I honestly, I mean, I'm sure you guys can tell by listening to me, but it's like, all of the pieces here don't really add up to me. I don't know what the strategy could possibly be that would make sense. I mean, obviously Netflix, great streaming technology, PlayStation, great creators of games. But again, like I said, they have that conflict. They already have a game streaming service that is not very good. So, I mean, maybe that could be the thing. The PlayStation
ding.
Now, yeah, maybe it could fuse with PlayStation Now in some way, but it'd be complicated. But I guess they could, if this is the answer to Game Pass, then yeah, it would be complicated and be something that would take months to pull off.
I gotta say that I don't find this conflict as compelling as others do, because Sony would light PlayStation Now on fucking fire if they could get involved with Netflix and their technology instead. So that to me means nothing, right? Like, because Netflix's streaming technology is so much more sophisticated than whatever Sony's doing that they'd probably be like, fine, I don't give a fuck. We invested in this. Like, we're going to have Netflix is like the gold standard of streaming technology. So yeah, Chris, what do you have to say about it?
Well, I agree, but I also wonder, like, is their streaming technology so good that it could handle something that is purely interactive? Like, Bandersnatch was an interactive TV show, but it was still very minimally interactive. Like, we don't really know, like, it's hard to really gauge what the latency on Netflix is, because there's nothing to really consider. You know, like, is Netflix more equipped to stream games than PlayStation Now is? I feel like the answer is probably no, because it's not built for that. It's built for a very specific purpose, and has been built for that purpose, and probably honed in and tuned specifically for that purpose, which is why it is the gold standard of streaming, passive entertainment. But there has to be a difference between the way that Netflix handles latency and the way that and Hulu handles, streaming, and the way xCloud or PS Now do it, just purely based on the dependency on interaction and, interactivity. Like, I don't think they would set PS Now on fire, especially because they have, they don't have a lot of subscribers on there, but they do have like a decent chunk who would, I think, feel a little burned if they just kind of got swept away without being like kind of grandfathered into whatever the hell they're trying to pull with this Netflix thing, if anything is even happening. This honestly seems to me like I'm with Dustin, where like none of this adds up to me, and I feel like it's almost like somebody was putting together a pitch meeting. It's like, this is a big game, and here's a controller, like, and they're like making like a PowerPoint or something. That to me is the only way that this could make sense, because I don't understand like why Sony would mix the messaging up with their, especially with them going to PC as well. Like, so you got PC, and then you've got like Netflix, but you've also got PS Now, and like one's streaming and downloading, one's only streaming, and it's a partnership with Netflix, and then one's downloadable on PC. It just seems like such a mess to navigate as far as like the messaging goes, that I can't imagine that they would. I can't imagine that this means much of anything. Like, it's such a confusing array of variables to consider.
Yeah, I find your answers, both of you, compelling, but I can't say I agree. I think this would be such a megalithic partnership, just hypothetically. I'm not talking about anything that may or may not be happening, but imagine if Netflix has been working on something for games for a while, which they probably haven't. Sony has some sort of relationship with them, and they get together and they're like, well, what if Netflix acts as the technology or something to leverage your games into, like, what if Netflix gaming is powered by PlayStation, even in the reverse? Like, what if we're the streaming solution for your games? You have now 210 million subscribers, so that Xbox Game Pass number sounds fucking comical at that point. And you just jump ahead and you have the biggest partner with global reach. Now, the numbers for Netflix aren't all great. They actually lost almost 500,000 subscribers. I don't know if you saw that in the United States and Canada last quarter, but they're up globally. So I look at this and I say, this would be sophisticated, Chris. You're right. Like, it would have to deal with all of these different angles, but this is like what massive partnerships look like. And we're just it's just all hypothetical based on uploaded images, but I'm compelled by those images for two reasons. Number one, some people have brought up, well, Ghost of Tsushima is getting a film, and that's true. So that could be like a reference to that. But I'm like, no, because Ghost of Tsushima's film is a theatrical release through Sony Pictures. That has nothing to do with Netflix. So that, I think, is a reference to a game. I don't think it's a reference to a movie. And the second thing is like pictures of DualSense. That's just why. So it could be as simple as like, and this is what David Jaffe said, and I think this is also interesting. He's like, well, and it's true. We've all pitched things like this or seen it in pitch meetings where it's like, I'm pitching a game that's like Zelda and this. So here's literally a picture of Zelda, and here's like literally a picture of this. And I know, like, when Sunset Overdrive was pitched to Microsoft, they were pitching it with like punk music and all sorts of shit just stitched together. And this could be it. This could be someone saying like, here's a Ghost of Tsushima image, and here's a video game controller and all that. But why would you upload it to Netflix? Why wouldn't that just be on your deck when you're presenting it in a boardroom? So I think that there's just interesting pieces here where I'm like, I don't know that there's nothing here. I actually think that there might be. And I think Sony's been awfully quiet about a lot recently. I think they have a lot to say. And it's conceivable that maybe, I mean, could you imagine if they were like, we're partners with Netflix? It doesn't mean that Netflix isn't available everywhere still. It's just saying like, they're getting into gaming, and we're going to be a big part of that. And I think that's a huge win.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it would be interesting if that was true. I feel like this is just a minefield to navigate. But if they're willing to if they're willing to navigate that and like kind of suffer through a little bit of like I don't know, like a few months of like really muddy messaging to come out the other side with something that is ultimately like super widely available and very enticing, then I guess it would make sense. I just I don't know if I'm super convinced. Like I'll need to, because my biggest question here is like, we know Sony isn't the best on the software front, not in the games front, but as far as like software goes and streaming goes, we know that that's the case. We know that Netflix is really good at that, but we also know that they've not really dabbled in games and in the same way that a lot of other companies have. And dude, even like companies like Google, which you think would have a better eye for this type of thing, just completely fail, out the gate with Stadia. And God knows how many other companies have tried this as well. I'm just I'm curious as to how savvy Netflix is as a company, and if they can pull something like this off, because they've really only ever stayed in their lane. Like they've never really tried to expand in any real way. The last time they really tried to expand was when they started streaming, and when they were like, "Hey, DVDs, fuck you, you don't want a DVD
do you remember,
in your mail."
By the way, do you remember when they tried to rename themselves at that time? That's like a almost forgotten piece of history.
What was it?
Netflix, I think, was going to be the company's name that was going to be the disc service. And they were going to name, or maybe it was the other way. I got to look this up real quick. It's like Netflix renamed. Yeah. And it was like, it lasted literally, I want to say like 2.5 seconds. Yeah. It was in 2011. Netflix changes name, apologizes to customers. And, oh yeah, they were going to call it Quickster, which was going to be like So
wow,
that was I'll never forget that. I was like, what that story lasted literally half a day because everyone's, you're going to rename Netflix? You can't do it. So anyway, Dustin, what's your final verdict here?
Here's a hypothetical question. Okay, let's say this does happen. Netflix, PlayStation partner up. You can play select PlayStation games via Netflix or something like that. Can you play Ghost of Tsushima on the Xbox app on the Xbox Series?
I don't know.
S or X.
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know how this all works. It would be. I would imagine, though, it would be wild. I would imagine, again, this is all just speculation from a couple of images that were scraped off of Netflix. But it all seems to kind of make a little bit of sense to me. It's one of those things I keep saying recently where it could be, and I'm probably wrong, but I at least want the audience to know where I'm coming from. And I think that my sequence of like where I'm coming from here makes a little bit of sense. Like you want, like, who would be a better partner than Netflix to proliferate subscription services? Would you have some sort of boutique version of Netflix only for PlayStation, which would be interesting as well? And all of the rest, we talk about that in the inverse with Game Pass. So I don't know if there's anything here. It's fun to think about. I really want to see what Netflix's solution is for games. And you're right, Chris, they haven't really tried to do anything in a while. There was 3 big steps for them. It was DVDs, then it was streaming, then it was original content. So this will be the 4th step, which will be interactive media in a greater way. And what's interesting is that I'm curious, they said openly that they want to work on like mobile titles. So it seems like they're going to work as a publisher. And so who the fuck knows what that means? I mean, it could be that they're going to publish a AAA Stranger Things game on PlayStation 5 for all we know. And it's, I don't know. I have no idea. But I just think it's weird to have a DualSense controller and a Ghost of Tsushima picture in your backend for no reason.
Yeah.
It is weird.